Hi, I'm Shelby Williams from Plano City Council, and with me tonight, or this morning, whatever it is my deputy council member for Place 5, Valerie. What time is it, Valerie?
It's 1:15 a.m.
That's right, it's 1:15 a.m., and only a teenage girl would still be awake when I came home after 1 in the morning from the council meeting, which just fell 20 minutes shy of our record. Tonight's council meeting lasted 8 hours and 29 minutes. We got a little bit of an early start. We started at 4, so it's displaced by an hour. But we had an action-packed agenda for you. So starting with tonight's preliminary open meeting, last night's, whatever. We're kind of in a temporal anomaly here. We had a DART update. So as you might expect, there was a substantial decline in DART usage during the pandemic. The figures for Q3 of FY20, now that's the past quarter. We are in Q4 of FY20 because the fiscal year starts October 1st. There were 101,000 bus trips, 116,000 light rail trips, 7,000 GoLink and Uber Pool trips, and 6,000 paratransit trips. I should say riders. Numerous changes have been made to the routes to adjust to the pandemic, and we discussed making even more changes, primarily going toward a ridership goal, meaning to maximize efficiency in ridership, or a coverage model to increase the number of people who can ride. The point was made that by using Uber Pool, which, let's face it, that wasn't available when community bus systems were designed way back in the day, I would like to explore the opportunity to replace most bus routes within Plano with Uber Pool, if they're truly that much more efficient. We had a discussion about the Silver Line to DFW Airport, and there's going to be a community meeting on that on August 20th. So look on DART to view that community meeting online. You can go and weigh in at www.dartzoom.org. You can make your voice heard on this. And you can send emails to serviceplanning@dart.org. Now, there is a pilot program for GoPass Tap Card. That's basically a prepaid reloadable fare payment card that essentially gives you fare at half the cost of the regular fare. We then moved on to a presentation by the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee. As everybody who's been paying attention to the Plano Tomorrow case knows, the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee has been working since January, was formed by council last December to work toward a new comprehensive plan. The areas for review and revision are transportation, density, future land use, and growth management. Basically everything. There have been 5 months of meetings. There was a little bit of a hiccup due to the pandemic. 1/3 of the allotted budget has been expended. So we've got a little more budgetary room, but time is running short. Transportation policy and actions have already been sent to P&Z. Now, I did ask, what can we as council do to provide the CPRC, Comprehensive Plan Review Committee, with the tools they need to finish effectively in a timely manner? And they're going to consider that. Chairman Shockey feels that a level of cohesion has been attained, I should say, on the committee, so that they're making better progress now than they had been. And at the last CPRC meeting last week, they really started to tackle the question of density in a meaningful way for the first time. That, of course, has been the elephant in the room for a long time and was the primary objection to the Plano Tomorrow plan, which was just repealed. And so that has to be actually discussed in a meaningful way. We have to work through that before the CPRC can arrive at the true goal, which is a comprehensive plan that the overwhelming majority of our people can get behind. We then had the comprehensive monthly financial report. We were a little below target, again, as you can probably expect, but we're almost done with the fiscal year. So the fiscal year target, again, runs through October 1st. So the pandemic has really hit us in the last half of the fiscal year. Sales tax revenue was down 17.4%. The real estate days on market is actually shorter, 37 days in June, down from 47 days on the market from this time last year. So they're selling a bit quicker. Hotel taxes, hot taxes, as you can imagine, are substantially down by 2.1 million year to date. That's down 29.3% year to date. So substantial drop there, but not exactly a surprise. We did review that we have a $660 million portfolio. And then we moved to the CARES Act funding, the direct funding. Now, PISD has approached the city of Plano and asked for assistance from us for up to $500,000 from our CARES allotment, our CARES funding allotment for COVID-19 response. I did clarify that that the money would be used in line with getting the kids back to school rather than prolonging virtual learning, which is important to many parents, myself included. Then we had an update on the noise ordinance. Field tests were conducted in a couple of different locations, and interestingly, at ground level, the noise was less at the property line than further away. This was a surprise to staff, and the going theory is that it basically had to do with the echoes in the area. In the end, what we ended up doing was suggesting that for entertainment venues, that the time limit for Fridays and Saturdays, or time limit on Fridays and Saturdays, be extended by an hour or so, so that entertainment venues could keep operating a little more before the noise ordinance decibel levels kick in for the nighttime hours. We also discussed, as Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Riccardelli put it, I thought this was beautiful: if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it violate our noise ordinance? I would contend that, especially since we have a complaint-driven system, I would contend that if it doesn't bother anybody, then it shouldn't result in any violation. That, of course, is easier said than done when you're trying to craft an ordinance that covers the entire city. So that language is admittedly tricky, but that's what we should be going for, I feel, is to make sure that we have quiet, peaceful residential areas and that nobody is unduly bothered. We also discussed the notion that if you are building property next to a known existing noise source, that you take appropriate soundproofing actions as part of the construction process and as part of the building permit process. And that's a separate consideration. So the comparison would be, if you're building a house next to an airport, right next to an airport, you know what you're getting into. So you either soundproof your home or you don't get to complain about the noise from the airplanes. Conversely, if you're sitting in your house nice and peaceful and somebody builds an airport right next door, then you'd have room for complaint. We then moved into the municipal court prosecutor report. Now, there were a couple of things that I had to probe based on my own unfamiliarity. The municipal court covers up to Class C misdemeanors and fines up to $2,000. Now, I had been of the understanding that defendants could not appeal to the county because a few years ago, the Plano Municipal Court became what's known as a court of record. However, I was incorrect in this, but it does change the dynamics somewhat. So if I'm understanding correctly still, in the old system where we were not a court of record, a defendant could appeal directly to county and basically get a whole new trial. As a court of record, it's basically like going to an appellate court where they review the merits of the case to begin with. They don't have a whole new trial. So there is that. And then there are a number of, I probed the creative sentencing mechanisms, because one of the things that Michelle discussed was things like drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs. Within the confines of the law, how creative can we get in the sentencing, in the judge's sentencing or the prosecutor's recommendations, in order to maximize the chance that that visitor to the court will not come back to court in the future. So we then moved on to our regular meeting. We had 7 items on tonight's agenda. The first one in the regular meeting was, well, actually, I should say first, we had comments of public interest. Now, this is a section every council meeting where the public can say basically whatever they like about whatever they like. And it's not tied to the agenda items. We first had gentleman John Gibson talking about the homeless individual who has been staying in a structure of his out back behind the Plano bowling alley in East Plano. And so staff is going to work with him to make sure that that individual can be taken care of without requiring that structure to be taken down. Likewise, Andy Schiffer appealed to council to likewise appeal to Senators Cruz and Cornyn and Representative Taylor to encourage global foreign aid. The idea was that foreign aid resulted in growth overseas, which in turn brought back dollars to Plano. However, I would really want to examine the amount of dollars that came back to U.S. shores in comparison to the amount of foreign aid that left. What is that return on investment? And then Lily Bow spoke in, Councilwoman Bow spoke in thanks for the outpouring of love and support for the murder of Mrs. Sen last weekend. That was truly a tragic scenario, and Plano police are doing everything they can to understand what happened there and make sure that justice is served. So thank you to everyone for your show of support for Mrs. Sen. We then moved to the Beacon Square project. That was agenda item number 1. The Beacon Square property just north of George Bush and Coit is undeveloped land right now. There was a development project approved in 2014 for about 1,100 apartments in addition to retail and office space. The landowner has come back in light of COVID and asked to reduce the retail space, and I don't blame him. I mean, retail has changed constantly over the past couple of decades, and appreciably this year as well. However, with the redesign, there was the proposal to add some additional what are called live-work units, where basically there's a commercial frontage and the tenant could have the option of using it as commercial space in addition to living there, or using it as entirely residential space. There were several concerns noted with the changed design. It is worth noting that the original design with the apartments, the office space, and the retail, that was already approved 6 years ago. And so what the applicant was seeking was a change to that plan to add some, and I think 9 live-work units, but they rearranged several things. So they got rid of the concept of a main street through the community, and it was just pretty much a lot of segmented minor streets. The reduction of retail, as we spoke about, which I totally understand, but I have a hard time believing that the only way to replace retail is with multifamily. And another concern that I raised was the last traffic study for this was 6 years ago, and the area has evolved considerably. The whole city's evolved considerably. And I did ask whether there's anything like a shot clock for zoning. Now, I understand that for regular zoning categories, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but this was a special zoning category for this development. And I think if a developer asks for a specific zoning accommodation, then based on the circumstances at the time that they ask it, there should be some sort of shot clock to say, okay, start development within X number of years. Otherwise, circumstances are going to evolve beyond this. So basically an expiration date for special requests. Ultimately, this was, it did not pass based on a 4-4 vote. I should note that this was only the second time we had a 4-4 vote along the lines everybody keeps talking about since Lily Bow and I were elected last June. The first time that it happened was at the end of this June with the mask mandate vote. We then moved into a non-contentious request to rezone a small agricultural 4-acre lot to single-family 6, so that it could serve as to basically finish off the corner of an entire residential area. And that passed 8-0. The next 3 items were all tied in together with the Envision Oak Point area and the Plano Event Center redevelopment. Now, as many of you know, there's a proposed hotel going into the next to the Plano Event Center, and that looks to be starting in the relatively near future, as opposed to the rest of Envision Oak Point, which is a little bit further off. 2 new zoning categories were introduced tonight for consideration. One was residential community design, which was a mixture of single-family attached and single-family detached housing. Now, I actually think this is a great concept because it introduces a wide variety of housing types that we just don't have in Plano right now, from cottages and duplexes. We already have townhomes, but smaller lot footprint homes, and these are ownership options which increase and encourage stability in the community, which we just don't have that viable mix now. So I did say I would like to see the concept, if not the actual zoning plan, but the concept of this variety of single-family home types brought before the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee. But by the same token, many of us felt, in fact, a majority of us felt, that adopting a new zoning category while the CPRC is pending the creation of a new comprehensive plan is putting the cart before the horse. And so we did vote to table this, as well as the next item. The next zoning category was neighborhood business design, which is essentially mixed use. Multifamily, some single family attached, and business, commercial. And the next, which was the Plano Event Center area rezoning itself, we tabled all of them until January 25th. Our hope is that the CPRC will finish the new comprehensive plan by that time, which serves as the foundation for our zoning. We can then contemplate the zoning categories, which make sense on top of that foundation, and finally the zoning ordinances. We then moved into a public hearing on the budget, which is going to be just shy of $650 million, and the CIP, the Community Investment Program. Now, the next conversation, this was the item on the tax rate. This was a little trickier. The tax rate, when we passed SB2 last year, which was property tax reform, it changed the name of the effective tax rate, which we adopted last year, which just means keeping taxes flat on existing property owners from one year to the next. The name changed to the no new revenue rate, but also the calculation changed. Based on now for anybody who was paying attention to this last year, SB2 was rushed through in a last minute deal. Basically, it passed on the last day of session, and nobody knew what the new version of SB2 looked like. So there have, as a result, been different interpretations by different counties about the calculation. And so Plano, of course, is primarily in Collin County, but has a sliver in Denton County as well. And so we've got 2 different interpretations of how the SB2 calculation should be applied. This has caused not inconsiderable confusion, added to which the delays wrought by the pandemic meant that we did not get our tax rolls from the central appraisal districts from Collin and Denton counties until way late in the game compared to prior years. On top of that, as if that weren't enough, the state comptroller has issued an opinion which further muddies the waters. So long story short, we're going to publish our proposed tax rate. We are proposing the no new revenue rate. However, that's subject to a new calculation. Under the new way of calculating this, and our budget director, Karen Rhodes-Whitley, she explained that it's a 13-page calculation. There are all sorts of exemptions that you have to take out of the calculation, different ways of calculating different things you add back in. It's a different calculation than we had before. Under the new calculation, with the proposed tax rate, it would say that we are having a very slight tax increase, but in an apples to apples comparison, with our new proposed tax rate, we will not actually be raising taxes over what we had last year on existing property owners. That is not counting new development. So we are, in effect, no pun intended, getting the no new revenue tax rate because we are keeping taxes flat on our property owners this year. But we, according to the new calculation, because of how everything is shuffled around and recalculated, it would have actually calculated less last year, and therefore it's going to show that we have a tax increase this year, even though we don't actually have a tax increase this year. Clear as mud, right? Lastly, we had a look at the proposed FY 2021 Community Investment Program. Actually, I want to take a step back. There will be a public city council budget workshop this coming Saturday. It's an all-day workshop. We're going to delve deep into the budget. And as everybody knows, this is very important in COVID year because we're adopting the no new revenue rate because we don't want to put an extra burden on our people. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're driving maximum value from the tax revenue that we are collecting to make sure that this remains the city of excellence. So speaking of the city of excellence, that's when we moved into the community investment program proposed budget for the CIP, where there's a proposed budget of just a hair under 299 million, which really I guess I should say is a hair under 300 million. So there's 29 million for Parks and Rec. There's 88 million for street improvements. That should make a lot of people happy because our roads need a lot of work. They are nearing end of life, many of them. 42.5 million for municipal drainage, 28 million for water improvement, 16 million for sewer improvement, 31.5 million for facility improvement, and 38.5 million for public works. If that doesn't come out to 299 million, call it a rounding error because I didn't go into precise numbers. That is this. This has been 22 minutes and 40 seconds now, I see. That is it for this very long recap for a very long council meeting. So we will have a town hall this Thursday on the budget. That will be just a very short town hall, but please tune in. I'll be posting the link for that as well. And then we've got the budget workshop on Saturday. So that's it for now. Would you like to say any last words, Valerie? Or Council Member Pro Tem for Place 5? Well said. Good night, everybody.